Hello, everyone, and welcome to a webinar from ThingWorx called A New Agenda for Item for Executives and Enterprise IoT. And I got to tell you, I'm going to enjoy this conversation very much. We have with us some great speakers. We have Emil from Machina Research. We've got Anthony from Tyco, and of course, we've got Dan from ThingWorx. Now, before we start, I'm going to remind everybody that this is interactive. We do want you to ask questions. By and large, for the most part, we'll save them to the end. Please feel free to do them. There's no surveys this time, but this is being recorded, and 24 hours from now, you can share this with the rest of your executive staff to help them make decisions in this world. So with that said, let me have Dan introduce himself. Dan, why don't you say hi to everybody?
Yeah, thanks, Carl, and thank everybody for joining us today on the webinar. I'm Dan Murphy, VP of Marketing for ThingWorx.
Excellent. And Anthony, let's have you speak next.
Hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Anthony Moffa. I'm part of Tyco Fire Protection Products.
Keep going.
I was going to say I'm the Senior Manager of Connected Services.
Cool. And Emil?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Carl. Welcome, everybody, to the webinar. It's Emil Bertelsen, Principal Analyst at Machina Research.
And we're going to let you go first, Emil, given the fact that you've got that lovely accent. So go ahead. Take us away.
Thanks, Carl. I don't know if it's a lovely accent. It's been a bit of a cough, so I do apologize beforehand if I suddenly disappear for 1 second. But I've been lingering with a bit of a cough. But let's get on to the topic here. By way of introduction, my name is presented with Emil Bertelsen, Principal Analyst at Machina Research. Machina Research itself is a leading research and consulting firm providing market intelligence and strategic insight to help clients maximize opportunities from the Internet of Things, M2M, and big data markets. And in that context, we're more than happy to speak on today's ThingWorx webinar about a new agenda item for executives, Enterprise IoT. So what is really Enterprise IoT? Now, I'll start with a pretty radical statement. Enterprise IoT is fundamentally changing the business of companies. And the immediate question is, well, how is it actually doing that? Well, first of all, let's take a step back and look what are those components in Enterprise IoT. First of all, products. Products like lighting products, machinery, displays, the car, the home security system, the home camera. All of these products are becoming what we now term smarter products. And what's smarter about them? Well, they've got more embedded and enhanced processing power than before. They've got greater data capabilities, and they got bidirectional communications, i.e., we're now seeing products which are, to a great extent, able to capture the environment and digitize this information into data, which we are able to use for other purposes. But I think the second big change is we're seeing that these products are no longer isolated. They're actually connected. They're connected in real time. They're connected 24/7. They're connected and providing that information from that connected environment, those connected sensors. And as these connections become more and more pervasive, as more and more networks are rolled out, be they either short-range networks, be they low-power wide-area networks, cellular networks, satellite networks, what it is enabling are those products to send that data across the networks and back-to-back-end platforms, which is capturing that real-time information. Another development we're seeing in Enterprise IoT, and I've heard different stories to this, but another development is the convergence of operational technology and information technology. And let me take a minute to explain this. Operational technology can be looked at in terms of a machine plant producing radiators in a production plant. Those operational technologies should be very focused in actually the production process and would have a technology which is solely focused on that task. What we're seeing is many of these machineries are actually building in information technology as part of the overall setup. And this means that operational technology, together with applications, together with data, are now really creating some new platforms for production, for the development of products, and most importantly, the development of services. And this is where we come into the concept that's now emerging as part of enterprise IoT, servitization, or products are no longer just produced by OEMs for the sale of a product across the shelf, but products are being developed and designed with attached services, creating some very, very new and very interesting business models and relationships with customers between OEMs and the end users. What this ends up at the end of the day is a new form of competitive advantage. Now, what sort of services are we talking about and what sort of business models? The next slide just gives you a quick overview of some of the opportunities that are emerging in enterprise IoT. For example, performance analytics. Having your products attached and connected allows now end users, companies, service providers to actually constantly monitor the performance of those products, be they out in the field, be they in test mode, be they with the end customer. You can as well think about asset and inventory management. If you take, as one example, containers in a shipping yard. Previously, if you wanted to do some sort of an inventory of what there was in the shipping yard, you would send X number of people out with the clipboards to count them to find out where they were. With today's technology, with connected assets, it's a very simple and very quick task to identify where those containers are and what the numbers are. So in effect, having these connected products has really changed the number of the business processes we're seeing. We're seeing such other services as preventive maintenance, warranty management, and usage billing as a new concept, whereas before billing would be on a monthly basis, on a subscription basis, because products like, for example, a connected photocopier allows for the real-time delivery of the usage information being provided back to the service provider. They can now bill their customers on a usage or a pay-as-you-go model. We're seeing this as particularly in areas as car sharing as well as a new form of usage billing. Workflow optimization is another area which we're seeing in countries in Europe, for example, looking at Industry 4.0, the automation of industries. But I think two of the real big changes that we're seeing with enterprise IoT relate to the customer experience. Now, as I mentioned before, products like your lighting in your home, you being able to manage that, to control that via your mobile phone gives you a new total experience with your lighting solutions at home, with your music systems at home, with your entry systems at home, and just having new possibilities of interacting with those products through a service on the mobile device is providing a whole range of new customer opportunities, both for service providers, but as well for the end customer. And finally, product and service development. One of the biggest changes that we're noting in enterprise IoT is that with the launch of products, you're no longer having to wait weeks, months, maybe even years for feedback about the performance of products. Connected products are providing instantaneous feedback as to their performance, as to how what the performance is out on the road, and picking up information not solely from one factor, but from multiple factors. In fact, what is happening now is that with this instantaneous information and feedback happening, product design, product development are now able to actually immediately action any issues, any problems, any fixes that are required with minimal impact to customer disruption. So a number of new service opportunities definitely arising from enterprise IoT. I'd like to highlight, from those services, I'd like to highlight particularly four very specific opportunities that are emerging. The first one, and we're seeing this across the board in a number of industries for a number of products, is predictive maintenance. Having products that are connected with a degree of analytics now applied to the data that's coming from these products is allowing service providers to really assist their customers and provide a service on top of their products around predictive maintenance. In effect, reducing potential downtime and reducing any lost production. Very, very prevalent at the moment within engine maintenance and manufacturing industries. The second one we're seeing is really a change in ongoing customer relations. What we're seeing here is that by having products that are connected has extended the relationship between the OEM that has manufactured the product and the end user. And this extension of a relationship strengthens not only the brand and potential sales, but it as well allows for the OEM and the end customer to maintain that contact and look at, well, how does this product need to be developed in the future for the same customer group. There are two more areas in this area. As I mentioned earlier, business models, pay-as-you-go models are really coming to the fore here. Having real-time data allows us to monitor what is going on with the product and what is being used, and allows in certain scenarios like car sharing, as mentioned earlier, to be able to charge for the usage of a car in increments which were never seen before. And finally, and probably one of the biggest areas which a number of enterprises are looking at the moment, is data sharing. With all the data being produced by all these connected products, connected devices, connected sensors, we are now amassing a wealth of information, not only from the cameras at home or the information sources within the machines in our cars, but all of these providing new and interesting opportunities to create services to improve the customer experience, to improve the home environment, to improve the smart city in terms of security. So these were just 4 examples of opportunity areas which I think need to be highlighted in this growing enterprise IoT field. Enterprise IoT, though, is not a straightforward extension of what I'd say traditional IT or machine-to-machine technologies. It brings with it some real and some very different challenges that we are probably seeing for the first time. One of those challenges is scalability. We're not just talking about the number of machines or products that are being connected now. We're talking about the number of applications that can be applied and will be developed, and we're as well looking at the amount of data that's being created. It's moving from the terabytes and the petabytes to much, much further up in the scale of data being managed, created, and of course, with that, the implications it has on the infrastructures that support it. But with scalability comes another challenge in enterprise IoT, agility. One of the things that is very different in IoT is that where in traditional IT and M2M you may have started out with a very clear purpose or objective in mind of what you wanted to do with that solution, in enterprise IoT and in IoT in general, that solution may change over time. You may want to extend the number of applications that use the data. You may want to combine and aggregate applications. You may want to share data, or you may want to tap into data structures which you've never seen before and never used before. This is where you get into some discussions about structured and unstructured data. What, in effect, the message is it is important when looking at the systems, the platforms that enable enterprise IoT, is that this element of agility is built into it from the very beginning. And with that, and with enterprise IoT, comes the whole topic of flexibility. Enterprise IoT is not just about creating a closed system. It's creating open systems where collaboration with new device manufacturers, with new application developers, with new solution providers can happen all throughout the lifetime of enterprise IoT. It is far from a static picture. Enterprise IoT is a very dynamic picture where you will continually be looking to develop the IoT capabilities of your products and your services, and constantly looking to develop them in new ways that may not have been identified before, which probably brings us to the 4th point, the whole degree of uncertainty or unpredictability. Really, enterprise IoT has a starting point. You may have an idea that you may want to start connecting your assets just to monitor where they are, but enterprise IoT delivers an opportunity for any enterprise to extend that to say, great, we're now monitoring our assets, but we'd like to really start to monitor our energy management as well within our company. We'd like to monitor the movement of our goods as well to other areas, and we'd like to monitor, for example, the security around them. This enterprise IoT is bringing all these elements of information from all these devices into a repository where you're able to analyze the data and pull together and build services for your customers. So the uncertainty is definitely one that requires a degree of strategic thinking from the very beginning, is how far can we and do we want to go with enterprise IoT. And one of the reasons why scalability is an issue, and if we look at the numbers here, today we are talking approximately 14 billion connections or connected devices, and this will move up to 38 billion connections by 2023. close to a tripling of it. And if you look at that and take just at a very high level, and if you move that into the scene of an enterprise, that is basically trebling the number of connected devices from today to the 2023. And this will extend across a whole range of not only their products, but internal processes, internal workflow integrations. And it is that scale and that change which it is very important for enterprises to keep an eye on. Now, I mentioned earlier that enterprise IoT is a complex, has a complex architecture, and will present a challenge for enterprises looking at it for the first time, because for the first time, it's not just IT they've got to think about. They've got to think about, as illustrated on the slide, the devices that are involved, the networks that are involved, the platforms, the applications of data, the analytics, and as well the integrations, the security, and the standards. There's a whole raft of components that now have to be thought about and considered in delivering any single IoT application. And I think what's worth noting here is that for different IoT applications, be they either a healthcare solution, for example, that will have one type of architectural profile. A healthcare solution will probably require a network which is highly resilient, which may be cellular in nature if it's a mobile solution, and will have definite standards around security for the data that's being transmitted across the networks. Whereas another application, for example, the smart meter, will have a whole different set of criteria for each of these components. I think just looking at the next slide now, what we're seeing as well is some of the old challenges will appear in new forms. And really here, what we encourage enterprises to look at in enterprise IoT is saying, what are some of the questions that will emerge now? How would enterprises identify significant opportunities in enterprise IoT? How do you strike the balance between long-term and short-term objectives? It is at this stage now where companies would definitely need to start to consider not only strategic questions about enterprise IoT, but as well the tactical and operational implications of them. I'm just going to the next slide here. I just want to reiterate one point before concluding. It is very, very important to consider the scalability, agility, and flexibility of IoT platforms. And really, top IoT platforms will look to remove three basic technology friction areas. First of all, this whole complex and heterogeneous ranks of devices, protocols, connectivity forms, and applications. We're seeing a whole host of assets now that need to be connected, and platforms will need to support and assist service providers, customers, solution providers in bringing all these different types of devices together under one platform. The other one is application development will become a key area. We don't see IoT platforms as just having one singular application purpose. Future IoT platforms will need to be able to work and aggregate and unify applications from a whole host of different scenarios. So as mentioned earlier, in the home scenario, you will have an application for your home security, an application for your lighting system, an application for your entry system, and an application perhaps for your energy management system. All these different application solutions will need to be developed and will need to work together. So the whole concept of an IoT platform will need to be able to unify these different applications. And finally, the time and effort that we all know that is involved in integrating these sort of data points, these sort of applications and platforms into legacy systems is probably one of the greatest challenges for most enterprises. These will never be overcome quite simply in one go, but with an IoT platform which is pre-configured or has integrations already delivered in legacy systems, you'll be closer to the 100%. You never get to the 100%. There will always be a degree of customization required, but the closer you can get, the quicker time to market you will achieve with your products. Finally, probably 4 important steps for executives to consider when looking at enterprise IoT. One is to identify the opportunities in enterprise IoT. Look across the whole scope of what sort of services are now being introduced as part of enterprise IoT. These services include, as mentioned earlier, predictive maintenance, usage billing, any sort of service now is being created with a huge host of opportunities. So definitely whiteboard this, brainstorm this within your executive groups, and begin to really map out where are the opportunities for the enterprise. The second advice is break down the compartmentalization of data. Don't let data exist alone in silos within the company. Share the data between the departments. Identify data sets which are beginning to enhance the insights around products and services. Third, focus on the future. Yes, you're starting enterprise IoT with focus on probably one or two applications, but think about the future and where you want to go with these services, and particularly when looking at the supporting platforms, the supporting solutions, think about that scalability, that agility, and that flexibility. And finally, look at building the right partnerships. These partnerships will change over time. As mentioned again, enterprise IoT is a dynamic world. You will need to look at partners from application to application, from environment to environment. But I think one of the key things in this whole setup of enterprise IoT is to build the right applications. And with that said, thank you very much. Back to you, Cole.
Oh, actually, I've got it from here in Alamo. Thank you very much. I wish I would have read this about 7 years ago before I started my journey. So my name is Anthony Moffa. I am part of a connected services team at Tyco. I'm in charge of data services and integration, and we're going to talk literally about putting some of this into practice. So a little quick one on who we are and what we do, and talk about where we started with this M2M program, and now we're calling it IoT. That'll tell you how dated I am with this world. And then we'll get through to how we've evolved our view of connections and getting from data to insight and what it's actually done for our business. So the big thing about Tyco, we are not this Tyco. I get that confusion a lot. We're actually a Tyco that's involved in the fire and security business. We are about 60,000, 57,000 people. We're in 50 countries, doing business in 200 different countries. We have about 1,000 locations around the globe. We do manufacturing, we do research and development, as well as sales and service. So there's a broad scope of what we do. And some of the things that we protect, we do major stadiums, top retailers, hospitals across the globe, 90% of the top 50 oil and gas companies, and even 100 firefighters, 1 million firefighters around the globe are protected by our Scott air pack systems. So we have a pretty diverse set of products and components that we work with. So with respect to our first M2M program, we got this involved in our Simplex Grinnell organization, and Simplex Grinnell does the installation and servicing of our fire alarm panels. There's a lot of legacy panels in place here. So what we started to look at was, well, what are our major service issues and challenges with respect to those? Yeah, if you look at install, commission, test and inspect, break, fix, it's a pretty big scope. So we kind of pared that down to something that everybody could digest. And break, fix was very simple. Because that full life cycle, again, too broad. So first rule that we learned, don't make it too big because nobody can really digest it. Or somebody once said to me, don't try to eat the whole elephant in one bite. So we got that down, and then we just did a very, very simple plan. This is a little bit of marketing involved in this. We do a dispatch to diagnose. It's the man in the van mentality. Send somebody out, have them look at it, decide what's wrong. So we decided we're going to turn that around. We're going to tell them what we're going to do is we're going to diagnose, then we dispatch the right technician with the right parts. Just taking that little flip was really nice because what we were able to get into the management scheme is they got this quick phrase, hey, we're going to diagnose, then dispatch. That at least gave us a little bit of momentum. Now, that system worked pretty well, except for one thing. We exceeded every metric that we had set for ourselves except for the number of connected assets that we got into play. But we moved first-time fix to almost 90%, which, compared to a man in the van methodology was phenomenal change. We actually reduced the number of calls that we go on by almost 30%. So we made a big change, but the problem was we couldn't get products connected. Even though we made it simple, even though we had brochures and collateral, even though we had some people, some subject matter experts to handle questions that people had from the IT side on our customer end, it didn't get on as fast as we'd like it to. But, you know, at the end of the day, the slow adoption was the result. It wasn't the cause. So we started to look at what the cause was, and the cause wasn't our technology, and it wasn't our customers. They actually were interested once we talked to them about it. It was really a business cultural issue for us. And when you break that down, there's a lot of stuff here, but at the end of the day, our salespeople didn't want to talk to IT. Quite frankly, our customers didn't want to talk to their IT department because it got into this discussion about things they didn't feel comfortable about. At times, IT is very demanding, maybe even, I don't know, sorry if anybody on here is from IT, but maybe sometimes condescending. That seemed to be the response that we were getting, so that was tough for the group. But we also learned in the process, it wasn't all bad, that our salespeople, you know, if we showed them what we were doing on the back end, they got it. They understood it better. And if we showed our customers what we could do and they saw the data, it became more of a pull and less of a push. So we had a choice. Gee, we can educate our salespeople to deal with IT, or we can start to change the process. So we started to change the process, and what we came up with on changing the process is, first step was, what really was connectivity? And I'm sure everybody's used to this view of the connected world. We've all seen service modems, the remote desktop logins, and using email. And we thought we had evolved to remote services, and we were great. We had that full-time connectivity, bidirectional, real-time notifications. But what we found was there's another step beyond that, at least in our world. And we started to look at the connected services environment, and we said, well, wait a minute. There is a life cycle that we have to address. Products are born. They're built, but they're not running yet. Products are installed, but they're not commissioned yet, so on and so forth. So what we evolved out of that was there were multiple data paths that we had to embrace, and we called that our ON program. So it was on record, on demand, and online. And the key to this whole thing was that we want to start the flow of data from the beginning of a product life cycle, not after it's been installed and 10 years later when we're first testing it. No, we want it at the very beginning of the whole program. So that gave us really a connected spectrum. And what we're all used to is the online. That's what we call we have a branded version called True Insight, which is our remote services platform. Connected 24/7, 365. It communicates real time, and it can be accessed remotely when required. But we scaled down a little bit. We said, well, wait a minute. We can help the process. Let's create an on-demand application. And the on-demand application is now branded as ExactTech. It's an internal branding, and it helps our test and inspect and our commissioning personnel go out and do their job. It's connected at will. It's a small box, cellular-based. Plug it in. It's battery operated. I plug it into my devices, and they're connected, and they talk to the server, and then we have access to that data in a variety of methods. And then there's the on-record or disconnected. This is for stuff that maybe can't talk. Maybe it can't talk because it never has electronics, but maybe it can't talk because it's currently not turned on. So this is more of a physical inventory model. But the idea is we want everything to go from physical inventory to on-demand to online. What we're starting to do is create the platform to say, here's the opportunity, and here's what we need to move into the different bins. Prior to that, really what we're talking about is, well, we think we have this out there, and here's what's currently connected. So I kind of alluded to this. We worked with Exceda's Exceeda-ready partner, Multitech, to build a device that we took out into the field with us. We used their OCG platform. That's an open communications gateway. It's a Linux-based ARM9 processor, and you can get it with Verizon or AT&T or Sprint as your cellular provider. And then that literally lifts all my data right up into the cloud. And my IT department's not involved in this at all. So from our technician's perspective, it's real-time access. There's no connectivity issues. It's done as soon as they plug everything in. The nice part about it is that we can take this technology and component and not just limit it to the on-demand, but we can start to leverage this mentality to get us online. And we're in the process of doing that right now. We're scaling down packages so that they fit inside of our equipment. They're listed for the application, and we can use them that way. But I think the big thing that we're trying to get across to everybody in our business is that it kind of goes back to Taguchi, who used to say, if you can't improve what you don't measure. Well, we're going to go one step further and say, well, you can't even measure it if you don't know where it is. So I can't service it if I don't know where it is. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do here. Not just open up the service venue, but open up the opportunity so we know where the products are that we're going to service. So we always talk about data, and what we've been trying to change internally is getting people into thinking about data is the starting point. It's not the end point. All right? We have a ton of data, but we want to turn it into something actionable. So we looked at that and we said, we know that people want to see something. We've talked to them already about this. We know that there's a pull when they see the data. But our original implementation was purely internally focused. Our remote services piece was we diagnosed in-house, we gave the information, the corrective action to our technicians, and we produced that 89% first-time fix rate. But that didn't do anything on the back end for the customers. So now we said, all right, we want to open that back end up. And we knew that the Exceda platform wasn't really going to be the graphical user interface that we wanted. We wanted to change into something. But they gave us the opportunity to pull the data out. So the first thing that we did is we built a system dashboard. And the system dashboard actually was a variety of views that gave us a scaled-up level. What's going on with all of the fire alarm panels that are out there in industry that we're connected to right now? So the example you're seeing on the screen is, well, the pie chart on the left shows me a lot of them are good, some of them need maintenance, some of them have troubles. The pie chart in the middle is just a breakdown of how many models, what the model types are. Excuse me, that's one on the right. The one in the middle is what's connected, what's disconnected. And if I click on any one of those pie charts, I'll get an associated map that shows me where those items are across the globe. So we had a nice interactive design, and it allowed us to do a little bit better management of the equipment that we had. And we're showing this to customers, and it's like, oh, I want that for my equipment. So this is where Mel points out you start to get other service opportunities, because now I'm actually going to be able to open up data and sell it to my customer. We also went to the next step that we chose to do was an interactive display of the data with a mobility platform. From our technician's perspective and our portable box that we've created, they can now actually go out, connect to a panel, and they can walk around the building and do some of the break fix or test and inspect maintenance that they need to do. And they're getting the response that the panel shows them on their handheld device. They're not physically out running back and forth to the panel like they used to or deploying to men. So gave us something internal, but again, this can be scaled up to provide customers with a similar approach and a similar interface. The difference is the customers now would have to go from the on-demand to the online version. And then we did something that kind of changed the way we looked at the world. A fire panel is an asset, but a fire panel has thousands of other things connected to it in some cases. For the most part, several hundred at least. So from Exceda, we were running weekly reports, and those reports were being uploaded into Exceda, and they were being looked at based on some flags that we would set. And we would tell people, by the way, these devices need to be maintained. They're getting dirty, essentially, is what's happening. Well, we took that another step. We said, well, we've got all this data. Why don't we start taking that data and analyze it? So the team that works for me took the data. They transferred those reports, which were really nothing more than text reports, but they transferred them up to a server. They parsed them, they stored them, and they analyzed them. And then they produced a database of all that information. So now we're looking at over 100 weeks of data, And we're looking at, at this stage today, about 100 million data points that we're looking at. It's not a ton in the terms of big data, but for our business, it's a lot, and it's eye-opening in terms of how our equipment is working. So now, rather than somebody have to physically look through hundreds of devices to figure out what they need to work on, we actually provide them a focused report that says, here's the 15 or 20 devices you really need to work on. And we do that off of static thresholds or off of trends. So we're doing both types of analytics in there. And that's all about the hardware, but we're also running a business, right? And so we take the data that we have and we can start to learn about our business. We can start to learn about what our offices are doing, what our technicians are doing, what our most common failure modes are. All of that information is available inside the data. You just have to take the time to sit down and say, what data do I have? What can I analyze out of that? And the nice part about it is it's a feedback loop. This is not a one-and-done program. So you get into this and you get data and you say, you know, if I could get additional data, I can do this. Now, sometimes the additional data may require that we have to change our field equipment so that it provides the data to us. In some cases, we want to pull that data from other systems. So, for example, I may want to pull it from my CRM system or my MRP or PLM system. So I can integrate all of this data and then say, great, based on the information we have, this is what we're seeing. So we're really starting to take this data now and not just fix our equipment, not just decide what the equipment needs to do for the future, but we're saying, what does our business actually need to do? So some of the business impact that we've seen, I've already stated that we've changed the first-time fix rates, and we've been able to reduce our time on site by saying we're not going to show up for stuff that we know we don't need to fix, or we can predict certain things and say, well, rather than on an ad hoc basis, we'll combine several visits into one and do a more concerted effort. The nice part about it is we've reduced disruption at the customer site, and in many cases we've actually reduced the cost to the end user. So you kind of have to take that into consideration. If you're charging every time that you go out, then you got to be concerned about that. What you find, though, what we found was even though we may be charging, we may not always be collecting. So that was a little bit of an urban legend that we found. Yeah, we charge every time we go out. You find out you don't get paid every time you go out. And one of the big things that we brought up out of this is that connecting assets was not the what that we were worried about. It is the what. It's not the why. If you look at the ROI equation, the number of assets you connect drives the ROI equation. And you just can't let that take over your control. What you really want to worry about is you want to worry about getting data flowing, and that's really what we learned from all of this over the last several years. We do make a distinction, and the distinction that I want to bring up is that remote services for us was about changing the way our customers experienced our service. But connected services is really about the changing the way our customers rely on the products and services that we have, the way they interact with those products and services, and the way they interact with us as a business partner, not just a material supplier. So in the end for us now, the connectivity component is really expected from our field. It's no longer the exception. And I think that is it for my slides. I'm going to turn this over to Dan at this point.
Great.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, before that, let's talk a little bit about the overall experience with talking to the customers directly. And I got a kick out of you saying that IT is not necessarily the people that the group wants to talk to. Anthony, do you think that going back to Emil's slides, that the first line of defense is really kind of putting out the fires and getting operational efficiency, or do you think, the problem that I'm trying to address is how do we get to the point where we're actually talking about kind of process reengineering and what the real value that we can get out of this stuff is? Not to use an old term, but I use old terms, so I apologize for that. Any thoughts about that, Anthony?
So from the one thing that we fall into a trap with is that technology is a tool. It's not a solution. And I think a lot of times people feel that, oh, if we deploy technology, it'll fix the problems. And to your point, Carl, if you don't have the process that's in place to support it, the technology is not going to do anything for you. There's no doubt in my mind about that. We actually re-engineered the processes of service within our business once we started to deploy the remote service component, because we didn't want people going to the site only to find out we had a better solution for them. So that's, I think that's what you're getting at, is that, you know, we need to have the processes in place. And we thought we had all that in place. So, for example, we had PowerPoint presentations and white papers to give to the IT department. And we had people like myself who would pick up the phone and talk to the IT department of the customer side when they had questions about security and connectivity and bandwidth and, you know, could you use this on a VPN and so on and so forth when those things came up. And even though we had that addressed, it still didn't solve the problem. And the problem being our salespeople didn't even want to get into the IT department. The customer didn't even want to get to the IT. So we didn't even get to the stage of having those discussions in many cases.
Yeah. Dan, I'm a little bit worried about time. I've got some questions for Anthony, but let's save them for the end, and then we'll deal with everybody.
Sure, no
so
worries.
Go ahead and take it away.
I'll try to get through the commercial part of this pretty quickly so we get plenty of time for Q&A from the audience. So I appreciate everybody here. And Anthony, great case study, probably one of my favorite customer case studies that we have in terms of your success and the results that you're driving at Tyco. So kudos to you guys. You're certainly one of the leaders, the pioneers of this whole machine-to-machine and IoT in terms of driving results back into the business. So always great to hear your story again, and I think you guys are on the forefront of making this whole idea of enterprise IoT a reality. And when we look at it from our customer base, it's definitely, you know, across every industry. It's not just industrial equipment. It's not just medical devices. We're seeing connected cars. We're seeing consumer products. And there's a lot of different use cases that are really popping up in, you know, whether it's a vending environment or in your production plants. Things are getting connected, and this whole transition to connectivity and intelligence built into products is driving this revolution of enterprise IoT. And one of the things to really investigate first is, with that transition, the transformation of what a product is happening in parallel. So you have this idea that manufacturers have for a long time created great products. They're physical products, electrical, mechanical components. But more so now you're seeing electronics, controls, sensors, software, UIs that are, you know, whether it's a onboard diagnostic display like you see within a car, or it's something that gets displayed on a tablet or a smartphone. There's a lot of different interactions that are happening with the device, even remotely now. And all that is driven by connectivity and this intelligence. But behind the scenes, as Anthony mentioned with the Exida Machine Cloud here, is this idea that there's a place where you can not only capture that data but manipulate it and then use it within different parts of the business. And I love the term that Anthony used called feedback loops, right? Getting that information to the right person to make better decisions, optimize a process, or create better customer results. So we're seeing this whole composition change, but with this, you know, there's great value that comes, right? When you think about the main components of what's possible when you have smart connected products, you can do 24/7 monitoring, and the example here is a pacemaker that delivers wireless data to doctors to monitor their patients, or remote control doors, so you can see who's at your door. If you want a package delivered, you want to put inside the door, you have the ability to see who's at your door when they're ringing the bell and remotely give access. The other one is optimizing your devices, right? So a product manufacturer can create one configuration of a device or of a piece of equipment and give different options through software capabilities. So you're seeing a combine here as an example, but this particular example, you know, you can decrease and increase the horsepower of that machine by unlocking capabilities within the software components of that machine. And then automation, there's a self-automated swim diver here, which is the shape of a tuna, but it's unmanned vehicle to do measurements undersea. Great kind of examples of what's possible when you have smart connected products. And there's a white paper on the PTC website, ptc.com, that talks about this. It's a Harvard Business Review article that was co-authored by Michael Porter from Harvard University and Jim Heppelman, the CEO of PTC, that talks about this in greater detail. I encourage everybody to go and download that white paper. But as we kind of talk about what Anthony and Emil were talking today, is this whole idea of enterprise IoT. And this is that expansion of those feedback loops. So when you have smart connected products pushing data into a product cloud, the idea of where does that information go to and how do you make sure it gets to the right person at the right time with the right context. And when you look at who could get value from that, Anthony talked a lot about the service use cases, right? Being able to do remote service, predictive maintenance, make sure that if you do send somebody, you fix it right the first time. And I love the stat of the 90% first time fix rate that Tyco has. But even beyond that, taking that data and driving it into other parts of the organization, whether it's manufacturing intelligence or sales for better lead generation and enhanced visits to your customers, engineering with product design, making sure that you understand how your products operate in the field so you can understand which features get used or which features are necessary, or even finance, creating new business models, usage-based billing, power by the hour, doing consumable replenishment, all that kind of things that are possible when you start getting real-time data feeds back into the organization. And I think this picture, in my mind, represents the best visual of what enterprise IoT means. So I think when you're starting to build a business case internally, you think about how does this data flow and all of the different systems. So you could take these general PLM, SLM, ERP systems and start putting in your individual piece parts, right? So maybe you have Oracle or you have Salesforce.com running your CRM. Maybe you have Creo as your product development system, or you have Servigistics on your service side. All this data flowing into there is where you get additional value. But in order to do this, you've got to have a way to do it, right? You need a platform. And Anthony talked about Exida. And you may see the ThingWorx branding here, and people are asking, okay, so what's the difference here, Exida, ThingWorx? Last year, in 2014, PTC, which is a billion-dollar software company based out of Boston, acquired both ThingWorx and Exida. And together, we make a great platform. So the machine cloud that is Exida is now part of the ThingWorx overall IoT platform. And what Exida takes care of is that connectivity and pushing information into the cloud. And ThingWorx is a robust, rapid application development environment. So when you put it all together, you have the full capabilities to connect, manage data, and build applications. So putting down at the end component, the endpoint, you have some kind of software or sensor-based information that passes information over a network, and it could be a wired or wireless network. And that information goes then into what we would call the application enablement or machine cloud capabilities, where the data gets stored, you run business logic against that, you're able to use web services or APIs in order to access that data to very quickly build out applications and integrations. And with ThingWorx, what we've been told by our customers is it's 10 times faster than if I was trying to do this by myself. So getting this data now into your cloud services environments or business enterprise systems, or even pushing it into big data analytics systems. But all the while, as Anthony was talking about, building these dynamic applications that are custom to your business. So how do you build screens and maps and different UI, charts, and components very quickly? Well, ThingWorx provides a great platform for doing that. And one thing to note here is, we do this for a lot of companies. Hundreds of companies across the world, big Global 1000 and even small startup companies, leverage the ThingWorx Exida platform to build out these great solutions for smart connected products. And when you look across, well, is it medical devices, is it industrial? We're oftentimes asked the question like, what verticals are you working with? Well, we work with all of them. We're a horizontal platform that provides these state-of-the-art, best-in-class IoT capabilities for building out solutions within any industry, any device type, over any network to build any end-user application. And it could be a web-based application, it could be a tablet-based application, it could be just an integration to a third-party system. So what I'll leave with here before we get to the Q&A is a couple things. First off, We just co-authored a white paper with McKenna, and Emo just was the author of this, and it's up on the ThingWorx website. So if you go to ThingWorx.com, you can grab the latest white paper, and it is titled, what this webinar was titled, which is a new agenda item for enterprise executives, enterprise IoT. So I encourage people to go grab that white paper, give you more depth beyond what you saw here on this webinar. Obviously, this webinar will be recorded, and we'll send out a replay link for everybody to access and share with your colleagues. But also, if you want to see us in person, we have a great event coming up in Boston in May. So we have a 4-day event. It actually is preceded by a hackathon that's going to happen on the weekend over at Boston University. And that'll be an opportunity to get your hands on the platform, build out some great solutions, compete for prizes. And I think the most cool part of that whole hackathon is the awarding judge is going to be Steve Wozniak, one of the co-founders of Apple. So I think it's going to be really cool to have him there, but also give everybody the opportunity to hear from him and his thoughts on IoT. But beyond that, we have a conference that there's pre-conference on Monday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday are the main conference days, followed by a developer day on Thursday. It's all happening at in Copley Square at the Westin Hotel and the Heinz Convention Center. And you can get more information by looking at liveworks.thingworx.com. So with that, Carl, I'll pass it back over to you so that you can handle the Q&A part.
Excellent. And I'll second the notion that the May event is a great event. So I recommend it to all. Now, with all that said, Anthony, you've got a few questions here. And the most interesting one is, what would you do different if you had to do it over again?
I would have quit and hired myself as a consultant. I would have got paid more and done it a lot faster. Well, you know, it's I've told people that, you know, you get a large organization like Tyco, it's kind of like steering the Titanic with a popsicle stick. There's a lot of operational momentum that you have to come up against and work against. And, you know, you learn who your allies are and who your enemies are in some respects. You know, there are detractors and there are promoters of this. And so knowing what I know now, I know, you know, who those promoters are. And you just got to remind yourself that this is not purely an engineering issue. You know, it's a bit of engineering, it's a bit of operation, a business operation, and actually a large portion of politics. So, but you know, we went the path of using a partner like Exida/ThingWorx to implement this. So that really shortened the life cycle of getting things on board. You know, I think the big thing that I would probably change is maybe I would have gone to cellular sooner to get around the connectivity piece with the IT departments. But, you know, technology wasn't there 7 years ago when we started this, at least at a price point that it is today.
Okay. We've got another question for you. It's can you talk a bit more about the organizational side of the data analytics work? How did you build, change the organization to manage this and tie insights into new initiatives?
So the group that I'm in is called Innovations and New Ventures. We just happen to be the connected services part of that, Innovations and New Ventures. The nice part about that is that we're given a little bit of latitude to search for these opportunities. And we have a growth board as well. So it's kind of a little bit like Shark Tank. You come up with some of these ideas and you present them to the organization, and they almost treat it as like you're a startup company, which is really nice. But it wasn't this way 7 years ago when we first, or 8 years ago when we first started the concept of connecting for remote services. So that's been an evolution over time. And we're not even at the point where we say have data scientists today, right? I mean, you look at these stories like GE hiring all these data scientists to start working on data. We're not at that point yet because we don't have millions of devices connected, but we're getting people set to the point of saying there's data and there's information, and look at the information you have, and we need to start changing. So that's happening. It's a slow process. but it's literally been an issue of, I could say one thing. This will never happen in an organization as big as Tyco unless you have passionate advocates who are pushing the initiative forward. You have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to keep selling it. You know, it's, as my one boss told me one time, it's probably 80% politics and 20% engineering.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because it answered another question. Dan, one of the questions was, you know, do I have to learn a whole new language to work with ThingWorx? So have you got an answer to that question?
Well, what the power of ThingWorx is that it provides utilities that people that don't even have coding background can build applications very quickly. So the mashup tool allows people to drag and drop components onto a page and then publish that without having to do any coding at all. So we have dialog boxes and the ability to dynamically link things down to the data sources that they come from. So it's a great way for folks that are, you know, maybe lower level developers can very quickly build applications. But if you have the ability to do HTML5 or JavaScript, the ThingWorx platform is also an enabler for those kinds of developers as well. So I guess the quick answer is no, you don't have to learn a new language, and it actually enables a whole broader scope, or I guess it would be skill level of developer to build IoT-based applications.
Okay, and I want to get Emil involved in here because we've been. I didn't get a chance to ask him some questions earlier. And Emil, I'm kind of curious. There's a question here for Dan about small medium business getting involved. Where do we stand in terms of, you know, the hype cycle versus the implementation, and are we seeing the small companies understanding this as well? Is this particularly a large enterprise thought leadership game? Who's making these transitions in business right now?
I'd say the very interesting component of IoT is that you're seeing a number of small businesses actually being able to engage in this because of the quicker time to market, the relative ease for them to actually do proof of concept and so on with in-house. The tools that are now available for small, medium-sized enterprises to actually trial IoT solutions is quite outstanding. And we're seeing both a mixture of the larger enterprises, of course, pushing the heavyweight, the bigger solutions, scaling up the solutions, but we're equally seeing the small and medium enterprises really getting engaged in this and actually finding the service opportunities as being an area where they can differentiate themselves from the larger players.
Yeah, and I would add, Carl, that for us at PTC ThingWorx, the fastest growing part of our business in terms of new logos, I would classify as small, medium businesses. We're seeing a tremendous amount of great innovation from entrepreneurs and people with ideas that may not necessarily have access to very large infrastructure and don't want to spend millions of dollars building out server farms and cloud capabilities themselves, but they want to leverage a proven platform to do that. So we definitely have a great part of our business coming from that small, medium-sized company. And in fact, for those people that are interested, you can go to the ThingWorx website and get started for free, no cost, no risk. There's a guided experience where you can interact with the platform, see all its power and capabilities without having to invest a cent.
Yeah, and Dan, I'll add that from Tyco's perspective, we started this in 2008, and if you remember the economy in 2008, people were getting laid off, business was down, and we were still able to, you know, get money that was not budgeted, and the time and the resources to work on it. So, you know, you can build a business case around it, and it's not that expensive of a program to undertake.
Which gets me to kind of an interesting sidebar. In effect, you trying to enable your customer kind of enabled services to happen. That in a large part is what Dan brings to the table. So I guess the question is do we have a never-ending chain here of sensors becoming services in the future? And if that's the case, is there a time when product management is the people in charge rather than ops or IT? So I'm asking this as a general question to all three of you, so I don't know who wants to start.
Anthony, why don't you go first? I think you have the frontline experience there.
Yeah, well, I think what you're talking about is if you look at the residential side and you look at the Nest experience, right, where the device itself really becomes the service. For those of you who are not familiar with the Nest smoke detectors, they learn from those detectors and they make modifications to the firmware in those detectors and the software in those detectors real time. So, those things are really, that's a service that you're talking about now. I'm going to help you reduce those nuisance alarms because you put this thing in the hallway next to your shower, right? So that definitely in the residential side, I think it's going to go faster and further than maybe the commercial side. For whatever reason, there seems to be a larger appetite, maybe because I'm in control of my budget and nobody else is at home. But the commercial side, I still see the same thing. I just think it's going to be a longer time before people really give up that control because too many people are involved in the process on that end.
Shorter life cycle too. You're in charge of your own budget and you can make up your mind and not have an implication for hundreds or thousands of others. So I get it.
Yeah.
Emil, you got a thought there?
No, I think you're spot on in terms of the life cycle as well, the speed. I think at the end of the day, you're going to have to look at as well as the customer experience and the customer demand is actually looking for these services quite much quicker than we're seeing it actually on the corporate side at the moment. So I think that's another thing that's driving. I think the last point to be made around services is it's going to be something we're going to see continuously developing. And a year ago we thought, well, this is really M2M, this is really a business to business. No, we're seeing much more consumer side right now. It might flip again. Don't know.
Got it. And Dan, at your show, I get to see a lot of people who have turned their business into services. You see them enabling other companies as a result of them to continue the service cycle?
Yeah, and I think that's even, you'll see more of that strategy in May for when PTC and ThingWorx make a few key announcements here. But that greater ecosystem beyond the manufacturer of how do you engage partners in the ecosystem to play a part in IoT, I think you're going to see some great announcements from us, but also just kind of that whole idea of this different layers of the ecosystem that now have different capabilities to provide services and value add on top of smart connected products. So I guess my answer would be, stay tuned for some exciting announcements there from PTC.
Excellent. Excellent. And with that note, I think it's time to end this call. I want to thank you all. I, as usual, got a lot out of it, and I'm excited about the future. So thank you all.
Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Emil. Dan.
Thanks, everybody. Talk to you again soon.
And I want to remind everybody it's available in 24 hours. Please feel free to send it around.